Evening, folks. It's Friday once again, and it's Friday waffle time. I keep saying I'm not going to do these, and I keep knocking them out. But anyway, listen, this is a bit of a special one. Anyone that watches my channel will know that there's a certain game where you try and keep pipes flowing called Super Pipeline and Super Pipeline 2. These are two of my most favourite video games ever, and I'm absolutely delighted to have the guy that coded these. He's a good friend and an absolute top bloke. It's Mr. Andy Walker. How the hell are you, mate?
I am main master, your man. On a Friday night, eh? Brilliant.
You've got yeah, you're hardcore, mate. I've got a cup of tea. I've got a cup of coffee, actually. You've got a glass of red wine. No.
It's just been one of those days. No worries, but that's gone now. It's giggles.
It's the weekend. Any nice plans for the weekend, Andy? You up to much?
Yeah. I'm going to do nothing. But boy, am I going to do it well.
That sounds like the best. That sounds like the best weekends. I mean, the problem with weekends is if as you get to a certain age, as you can probably testify, Andy, you can't really be arsed going out at night and that kind of stuff. And if you do go out, you end up kind of just sort of sitting about, and then you go out on the Saturday night, whatever. And before you know it, you're back at work, and it's like the weekend has just flown in. Whereas when you have weekends where you don't do anything at all, it seems to drag in, and you feel like you're getting your money's worth.
Oh, definitely. I'm going to take dogs for extra long walks on the beach. That's it.
Nice.
They swim all year round. Doesn't matter how hot or cold it is. They're in the sea. That's grand.
Where are you? Where are you about? Where are you about, Andy? You're obviously still in the UK.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a bit chilly, but I'm on the east coast of Yorkshire. I'm at Bridlington.
Oh right, yeah, but I know. I'm saying I know it well. Yeah, I mean, I've been down there. I've been down kind of most stuff like North England. It's a nice spot. Is that still a kind of tourist attraction, like for like the seaside towns and that kind of stuff, or like?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it really gets going in the spring and summer, and it's everything. You know, pleasure boats, ice cream, kiss me quick hats, everything, and arcades.
But have they got machines in it, or is it just these crap
No.
2-pence things?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of ride-ons and that sort of stuff, but they're a bit. One of my dogs has just it's just joined us, but it's where I cut my teeth as well. The first things I saw were things like Gunfight and then Defender. That's just set the whole thing on fire. It remains all-time favorite machine, bar none. That's Defender or Defender.
Are you any good at Defender?
I used to be. I'm too old now.
Away you go. Well, go on then. Shame me. What was your highest score?
I honestly don't know. I don't know because I think that probably the peak of it was when the shows were on, sort of 84, 85, something like that. And the shows were on, and you could just keep going. So mind you, there was no money ever wasted on Defender. It was just an investment.
Yeah, I mean, I think Defender was one of these games. I mean, because I where I live in central Scotland, I never really had any kind of arcades close by, so I kind of largely missed out on the whole arcade scene. I mean, the only time I got to play arcade machines was when I went to local sports centre. They had like one machine, Space Invaders. That was the first time I saw Space Invaders. Then I got Track and Field, 1942. But the only time I got to kind of experience arcade machines was when we used to. I don't know why, no idea why, but we used to go down to Essex, and it was a place called Roydon. We used to go down there every year. My mum, dad, my two sisters, and myself. And my dad would have this little trailer, and it was the big tent, and we used to go down there every single year, and we'd go like I don't even know what way we went. I mean, I don't think the M74 or the M6 were even around then. It was probably the past like Scotch Corner and down that way through Penrith and that kind of thing. It's probably that way. I don't know. But anyway, I'm going way off topic there. I'm doing a Billy Connolly. I go way off topic, and then I forget what I was talking about. But yeah, we used to, when we did eventually go in motorways, we would go in for. My mum always insisted. My mum wouldn't spend the money on like roadside cafes. It's too expensive. So she always made sandwiches. But we would have to go in for a pee, and usually I would see an arcade machine. Oh, can I get 10 pence? And I would
Yeah,
get one shot at one game. So that was that. But so I never really got a chance to play arcade machines. And then when the home computers became a thing, obviously I was aware of Defender. I mean, you couldn't. That was the thing about Defender. The minute you went into an arcade, you never saw it first. You heard it.
yeah, yeah.
But
Spot on.
that sound, that
Yeah.
firing sound was just completely distinctive. Even things like Robotron as well. But when I did try some of the kind of the home ports, it was just absolutely impossible, and I completely just stayed away from it until about when would it be? Maybe 3 years ago.
Aye.
One of my friends, Paul Spriggs, he actually lives. I can't remember where Paul lives. He lives down in northeast England. He was actually the high. He actually held the world high score record for Defender,
Wow.
and he was selling this Defender cab. It's not a real cab. It's one that's been built, but it's got the proper Defender controllers, up and
Yeah.
down joystick, and about 6 different buttons, and they're all properly laid out, and it's phenomenal. I've now learned how to play it. I'm absolutely pish, as you'd probably expect, but I can get to maybe level 3 or 4, but it's people going about how difficult games are now. Play Defender, then come back and tell us that you're good at video games.
Too right. Too right. That's got to be the yardstick, hasn't it? That absolutely is. But you're right. You heard it and you knew. You knew straight away they've got it.
Yeah, yeah.
That was the
Just
big.
the visuals of the game itself. I mean, it was almost a black screen, and it was like pyrotechnics, explosions going off, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the
Um,
explosion was great. It was bad to die in Defender, but it's spectacular when you do.
just don't
And
lose your last human, and then you get all the beaters coming at you at once.
yeah,
That is,
absolutely. But also, it's landscape, and
yep,
in the
yep.
80s, that was quite rare. Most of them were portrait, especially from the Invaders style.
Mm.
So they didn't have much lateral at all. It was all geared to coming down the screen and that sort of thing. Things like Phoenix and all the Galaxians and all of those stuff coming down the screen at you. But Defender was just so different.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, I'm trying to think. I mean, when you think of early games, obviously, as you say, Space Invaders was vertical. All these kind of early Astro Blaster and all these kind of stuff, Astro Fighter. I mean, Williams games. Obviously, Eugene Jarvis, he did Defender. Robotron was kind of was landscape as well. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just marked them as different, didn't it? Just that bit, and it changed the whole gameplay. Suddenly,
uh,
you're racing across the landscape, and that was great.
yeah, it's kind of crazy when you think about. These were two of the very very early games, and yet if you took 100 uh, people like myself and yourself of a certain age who still love video games, you ask them what their favourite arcade game is, chances are that Defender's going to be up there. So it's still regarded as, I mean, I would probably, it's a toss up between Robotron and Defender, in my opinion, is the best game ever
Yeah.
because well, in fact, I was just about to make a statement which is completely untrue. I did a video a couple of weeks ago with one of my friends, and we were trying to determine what made the perfect game,
Ah,
what made a good game, and we were saying, well, does graphics make a good game? Nah, not really. Graphics are nice, but they're not important. And one of my mates, I put it on Facebook. I says, you could watch this video, blah blah blah, blah. And he just put one word: Robotron.
ah,
Best game ever. I mean, it's it's simplicity itself. Move, fire. That's
yeah.
it.
But it's frantic as well, isn't it?
Oh,
Absolutely frantic.
yeah, yeah.
Same
But
guys, though, isn't it?
sorry, Andy.
It's the same guys that
It
wrote.
is. Yeah, it was Eugene Jarvis. He did both these games. Anyway, listen, Andy. I mean, as I say, I was just thinking before we kind of started this, and I was being 100% honest. Anyone, any of the people that are watching this at the moment in the comments will testify that I absolutely adore Super Pipeline and Super Pipeline 2. They're honestly, I've said that before. If I was to make a list of 5 of my favourite arcade games across any system, I'm still not sure whether I'd go for Super Pipeline 1 or Super Pipeline 2. It's depending on what day of the week it is. I would usually err towards Super Pipeline 2, but I still like to go back and play the original as well.
Yeah, it was an original. It actually started for the arcades. That's where its roots are.
Well, So, can just talk me through. Obviously, I know we've had a kind of these chats before, but obviously there's people that have probably not seen them. Just talk us through. So, how did you originally get involved in making video games, Andy?
I was in a quiet laboratory looking at electronics, especially high frequency stuff, when microprocessors came across my desk. And I thought, God, that's interesting. And God, I can do stuff with that. I wonder how it works. And I approached it from electronics engineering, I think. So I was wiggling the pins on the chips with program. And all I was doing was turning an LED on and off. But it was when I decided it should be. And programming, I was hooked immediately. So I built a 4-bit.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, a proper 4-bit little board, and then I got hold of an 8-bit development kit and just played about from there. And the people I was talking to, I was saying, what makes the difference here is how it displays. The better the display, the more people are going to do this. And it just became a thing I had to do. And so I quit that job and began to write games at home. Hang on.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm sorry. I just...
No problem.
My dog is actually, honestly, he's down there, look. And he is literally eating my homework. I can't believe
Not that old chestnut.
So that was the start. But the first stuff I was doing was 6502, because that was the kit I bought. I bought a Tangerine kit, and it came with Tangerine Basic, which I'd never actually used. I just wanted to make things happen on this little Tangerine kit, and I thought, I can do this for a living. I could see what was around at the time, and it was a game that was sort of a flashing asterisk in a corner. And I thought, yeah, I can definitely do better than that. So sounds a bit daft. So I decided I would build some boards, like a soundboard and a few other things. And in no time, I built a prototype and I stuck it in a local pub, the Seabirds Inn on Flamborough Road. And
is it still there, Andy? Is the pub still there?
Is still there. Yeah. I wish the machine was still there, I'll tell you. Well, it had only been there a day, and they were on the phone because it was jammed with money. And it was. I know it's been said before of early video.
Yep.
They were queuing, and it's only because it worked, and it sort of works. I had to load it up at tea time because it was a cassette load, because the one board wasn't working properly. So we could load it all into a RAM board, which was working fine, and provided there was no power outage, everything was okay. But it was full of 10p's, and that's the problem.
So you quite literally built your own computer, and then was this computer? Did you kind of build a sort of an arcade cabinet around it or something?
Yeah. A local joiner. local joiner made it for me. And while I was writing, I needed some income. So I used to sell monitors to the Open University for their campus. And because they wanted colour monitors and I wanted colour monitors, it was just a marriage made in heaven. So they paid me for that, which was excellent. And I just stuck it all into this prototype cabinet. And it worked. And it worked for long enough for me to say, I'll just rent this factory and start making them.
So, I mean, Nolan Bushnell gets all the credit for kind of making the first kind of arcade game, but I mean, I think you've got a bit of a say in it. I mean, what year are we talking about then, Andy? When did you first make your this arcade game then?
I should have looked that up, shouldn't I? I think it was 1982. We showed it at a show. So it'd been 1981 I was building it. I wasn't the first in the world because just round the corner from where my little store for the monitors and the bits and pieces was one of my favourite little arcades. And it's because I was playing games in there that I knew this was something I should be doing.
Right.
So
you
I really wasn't the first. I really wasn't.
Yeah. So when you so was this what was it called, the tangerine? Was it the tangerine? Did you have this tangerine machine in the cabinet, and then you built like a soundboard or something for it? I mean, you're a clever guy.
Well, electronics was my background. That's where I came from, and that's why I still love assembler rather than anything else. If you can wiggle the pins on the chips, then you're really in control. But it was a rack-mounted. Oh dear, that stock 19-inch rack. And in there, the first board was the main processor board, and then a memory board. There was a backplane board. Tangerine started to make it with a great big, like a Euro connector on the back. And then, saw the AY sound chips from Yamaha start to come along. So, built the circuit boards, etched them, kitchen table stuff. I knew it would work. But it's still such a joy when it does.
So what was? Apologies if you told me the name of the game and I missed it. What was the game that you wrote?
Well, the first one was Andromeda, which was a Defender ripoff. It was not as good as Defender, but it was fast. But it wasn't as good. But that was the very first one. But about 2/3 the way through writing it, the pit was born at that stage. It was just born out of an error because our spaceship it was a bit bigger than the Defender ship on screen, and it had a distinct tail fin set, and it would work fine when it was going from left to right, but when it was going from right to left, it didn't rub out the tail properly. And so it was drawing these patterns across the screen, and when you went back the other way, it sort of cut its way through this big noise scene that you could see. But there was this horizontal line just run straight through it. Oh, Christ, that looks interesting. And that's when digging through rock and stuff was born, just out of a mistake. And that was the pit game.
So does this Andromeda, I mean, presumably you've not got any footage of the game. Does it exist in any kind of shape or form now?
No, in my memory.
Shame. Yeah, just in your memory only. That's a shame. Is there not? You don't have like any tapes or that kicking about that you could?
No, there was no handheld device then, was there? You couldn't just point your phone at it or anything. Yeah. So, but it was a video juke to start with, because game 1 was Andromeda, game 2 was the Pit, and game 3 was something called Hunter, which was a top-down view of bombing things, which was an okay game, but nobody else had done a video game that you could hot swap, because I say it was rack mounted cards.
Yep,
While the
yep.
machine was running, you could take out one game, put in another. So being an electronics person, I thought, oh, that's really quite neat. And it didn't crash anything, and I made sure all the earth cables were fine and everything was really nailed down and safe. And that's what we went to show. I went to show it at, it was then the Cunard Hotel. It's Hammersmith anyway, London.
Is that in London? Is
Yeah,
it? Yeah.
yeah, it was a coin-op show. And so we got most of it running. Most of it worked, enough of it to show. So we rented a van, stuck everything in it, went down to the show and set up. And we're amongst all the, the big names of the coin-op world. And there's just us in a little booth.
In your transit van?
A little Renton Nissan it was, but it worked. Two of the games still loaded, though, into RAM. So that was a cassette load. And just before the show opened, the Lecky came down the row and said, oh, we're just taking you off for 10 minutes. You'll be back before the show. No worries. Nailed all the power off.
Oh, no.
So 25-minute load, wasn't it?
No turbo loaders back then, yeah.
Oh, dear.
So this prototype that you put into that pub,
Yeah.
would it only be the patrons of that pub that ever actually got to play that game?
Yeah. Yeah, but it was just in the lobby on the way into the pub. It wasn't in the main drinking area. It was on the way out of the toilets, actually.
Yeah, that's what most of them tend to be. They were always outside the toilets, because my dad used to go to the pub and he would get me a packet of crisps and a bottle of Coca-Cola, and I would stand outside and play Galaxians for 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's where it was. But they were queuing. It was crazy. It was just come back the next day, sort it out, reload it, because of course it's been switched off overnight.
Yeah.
Reload it, set it going again. But you knew if it had been a good night just by the weight of the cash box. You didn't have to count it. It's either a good night, or can hardly lift it, or not.
And was it 10 pence a shot, was it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And nobody was good at it.
That's incredible. So what became it? What became of that carbon at the end? Did it eventually fall to bits? Or
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it was a prototype in every sense of the word. The glass on it was not properly printed. It was just a color print off the guy who did posters, just literally stuck onto the glass, so you could see the patterns through the glass. Everything was just string and chewing gum. But, but it worked.
It did the trick. That is absolutely awesome. So at that point, obviously, you thought, well, a minute, there's money to be made in this computing game lark. Then you took your prototype down to the was it Cunard Hotel or something? And what was the point of that? Was that to try and get people interested so that you could then manufacture cabs for pubs and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, exactly that. Because the big buyers were people like London Coin and Bass, the brewery.
Oh, really? Yeah.
They had a massive estate. And if they said, oh, we want one of these for every pub in 10, then you could retire, because that's a colossal win. They had thousands and thousands of pubs in their estate.
Yeah.
And they did the buying themselves in those days. So, but it wasn't to be. We were bumped into a guy called Norman Parker there, and he ran a company called Xylec out of Burton-on-Trent, and that's the connection to Bass, because that's where they were. Wetmore Road in Burton-on-Trent was really part of the Bass estate, effectively. Those are supply industries. And he said, how many sprites have you got then? I said, none. It's all bitmapped. And he said, Christ, how do you get it to work that fast? And he said, there's a better way to do it. And we got talking, and it turns out that he was writing. He was the MD of a company that was writing games really successfully on their own hardware, which was Z80 as it happens.
Mm-hmm.
But the more he was saying, the more I felt like a country bumpkin. I thought, this guy knows what he's talking about, and I'm flying by the seat of my pants. But he also had an agent, a guy called Joel Hochberg, operating out of Miami. So I thought, oh, that's pretty brilliant. And he said, come down the factory, we'll have a look and see what's going on. Maybe we can work together. I thought, yeah, that's all right. And as a side issue at that show, there was quite a lot of Japanese there. Namco were there and a number of others. And stop me, I'm sure I've told you this story before, but it was, we were looking at the Pit game because what it told us was, of the 3 games, people liked the Pit best because you could select live on screen. Mm-hmm. And Pit, the stats for the Pit were better than the other 2 by quite a long way. And Andromeda was second. And the Pit, you were digging your way through all of this earth and rock, and it wasn't finished. If I'm honest, it just wasn't finished. So the patterns you could dig through, and the passages down which the aliens could get you, and the caverns for dodging falling rocks and stuff was different in scenes 2, 3, and 4. But in screen 5, we'd planned on graph paper, I might add. There was no there's no graphic application here. And then in there was the dragon that was the guardian of the wealth deep down below. So you had to go down there, but you could pick up dynamite on the way. And until you played through the first 4 scenes, you didn't realize what you needed the dynamite for. You could use it to get through a shortcut. But if you didn't use it there, you could keep it, use it to blow the dragon up later. So you literally lit the fuse and kicked it, and it slid along the floor and blew the dragon up. Then you got the riches. Ta-da! But that hadn't been written. It was way too complicated to take ages. Mm-hmm. So we just told them about it. And the people that took most notice of blowing up the dragon was, I'm fairly sure it was Namco, but it could have been Bandai. I'm not sure. But they took a great deal of notice and took copious notes and chatted amongst themselves about blowing up this dragon. Anyway, we'd gone off and met Norman Parker a bit later and formed a good alliance. His hardware was much, much better than my 6502 Tangerine kit, which was expensive as well. Mm. And his lads had developed a great sprite board. It was not just compact, it was swift, really, really efficient. And that was Chris Stamper. Later of
Rare and Ultimate Play the Game.
That's the one. So he said, look, have some of this hardware, get yourself a decent 2-pass assembler, and you'll be able to write stuff much quicker. The stuff they were using was probably professional, and mine was kitchen table. So I quickly did that, and he was right. It was much, much easier to write and faster. And ROM emulators, okay, they were a bit dear in those days, but you could just plug them in. There's no, it saved so much time. So wrote another game there. That was before I knew that Chris's surname was Stamper. Honest, as sure as I'm sitting on this fire engine, I didn't know his name. I honestly didn't. The first game I wrote on that hardware was something about Stamper because while you were trying to post a letter, there was a huge bouncing alien that would stamp all over you when it got you. It was written but never released. It didn't test well enough. But it got us into writing coin-op and selling coin-op games, and the pit was obviously going to work. People just liked it. It just played well. Earlier on, you were saying you had to talk about what makes a good game. And I still don't know. I honestly don't know. But I know it when I play it. I say, that's a good game.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with the colours. It's got nothing to do with most things. But somehow, the pit was just a good game. And it was quite funny, but really competitive. Got your heart pumping away there. And so Joel Hochberg took it to the States, rewrote it onto some Z80 hardware. We gave him all the source and all of the graphics. They did that, and it tested really well in Miami. So he licensed it then out to others. It was a really, really good license fee. I think it was a record at the time. It was $137 per machine.
Which was a lot of money back in what, 1982, you were saying?
Yeah. And so we made Billboard charts then as well in the US with that. It wasn't there for very long, but it was there. And I still don't have a photo of the Billboard chart where the pit is still there. Yeah, good time.
I'll need to do a wee bit of digging. So who eventually licensed the pit? Who actually put it out? If you were to go walk into a chip shop and the pit arcade machine was there, what would be the company that would be across it then?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked me that, because I've just had a senior moment now, because I'm incredibly old. I can't remember. It's on the tip of my tongue. I should know, because they paid for all sorts of things.
I'm sure somebody in the comments is going to be able to tell.
Yeah.
Give us that. I'm just going to quickly run. I did promise people, Andy, that I would be open to questions. And I've got a terrible habit of not looking at questions. So we've got a quick one here from Dale. Question for Andy. Games like Gyropod had some nice sprite. In fact, I'll just put it up on the screen so you can see it yourself. That's the easiest thing to do. There you go.
Yeah, some good sprite work. The most demanding. Oh gosh, that's quite hard. Initially, I'd have said it was CAD CAM Warrior.
I was going to say that, yeah.
Yeah, but Gyropod, he's pointed the finger really well, because the way that spins round.
Yep.
Our graphics lad, Andy Rickson, what a star. He spent so long getting them to work. It depends on time. When we first wrote the early Commodore 64 stuff, there were no toolkits, really. It was we were first to the trough, weren't we? So there was nothing to help. So all of that early sprite work was graph paper again, and then line by line you just hex code it and tap it into the character generator area, and it was just laborious. And quite a lot of the work that Taskset did, that was especially Paul Hodgson at Taskset, especially Paul. He did a lot of the sound utilities and quite a lot of the graphic utilities as well. And it just suddenly meant that we could provide Andy Rickson with a tablet and pen in those days to just suddenly animate things. And it was like a tenfold win on development time. But you had to put in those long hours that nobody ever sees. That'll never see the light of day. but it just meant that Andy could create some sprite graphics. I mean, the compromises were in Pipeline. Pipeline 2, we had 6-legged Venusian pipe spiders because we couldn't make...
That's a Sunday name, yeah. I think I call it that lobster bastard.
Yeah,
anyway, yeah, something like that.
Because 8 legs wouldn't work in the sprite, we just couldn't get it right. So we decided there were 6-legged ones instead. Because they're Venusian.
I mean, the thing about, I mean, I've got a list of the games. Taskset actually put out quite not an awful. It wasn't a massive back catalogue when you actually look at it compared to some companies, and it was over a very short space of time. I mean, according to what I've got up here, in 1983, a Jammin', Cosmic Causeway, Super Pipeline was 1983. Then in 1984, Bozo's Night Out, CAD-CAM Warrior, Gyropod, Poster Paster, Seaside Special, and then in 1985 you had Super Pipeline 2 and Souls of Darkon. I mean, one thing for 1983, I mean, even from the very first game right through, the graphics were very distinctive. They were very cartoon-like, and you'd be flicking through Zap magazine, and it was always colourful. And I think you used a lot of the old British postcards, the saucy, kind of cheeky, kiss me quick type kind of artwork as well. I think as well. So it was very, very distinctive. I mean, was it Paul you said did all the graphics?
Aye, Andy Rickson did the
actual.
Yeah, he's the artist involved. He began as an apprentice cabinet builder in that factory that was making cabinets. But he turned out to be just really good at drawing things that made people giggle.
Yeah.
And somebody else remarked on how British they were.
I think that might have been me actually, or was that back in the day? Because I mean, these games could not have possibly been made anywhere else other than Old Blighty. I mean, when it like Bozo's Night Out, was that all based on your personal experiences, Andy? Coming home from the pub, getting into fights and avoiding the women of the night and what have you.
They're all in that. That was really Tony Gibson's. That was so close to his heart. He wanted to do it, and the graphics were difficult. He brought a mate in to help with the graphics. They were really hard, but he knew what he wanted to do, and it was back in the day we couldn't use the words alcohol. It was wobble juice, wasn't it? But they were all written in Bridlington on High Street. And High Street you could do a pub crawl without leaving the one street. They start at the Star, Packhorse, Nags, Black Lion, Globe, Queen's, Board Inn, and the Old Ship Inn. Or Bull and Sun as well. So you didn't have to leave the street. They were all just in a row.
And was it a conscious decision? I mean, when once you'd written a game and put it out, would you sit around the kitchen table or a pub probably and say, right, what's the next game, lads? And was it a conscious decision to try and kind of keep to old British traditions like putting up posters and then trying to repair pipes, or was it just the way the thought process went? Somebody goes, what about making a game about this? And it kind of just went down that road.
Yeah. There was an ideas bag, stuff that we really must do, and there was all sorts of junk in there as well. So, if we were sat around with, say, there's Mark Butter, he sat there doing something with Pipeline, and you get an idea for another game. It's a decision whether you dump Pipeline at that stage and do the new game, but usually you stick the new idea in the ideas bag and come back to it maybe over a pint later on and say, does it really have legs, this, or was I just going off on one? Again, with Tony Gibson there as well, because Jamming again was his. That's the game he wanted to do as his first game on the 64. And again, in the background, Paul Hodgson wrote all of the sound utilities to make that possible, and it all sprang from the opening 10 seconds of Cosmic Convoy, which was my first interrupt-driven sound on a home computer. There wasn't a great deal of it around at the time, but again, all of that background stuff. There's an awful lot of heartache in there. I tell you, when I think the thing at assembler level, when dealing with interrupts for more or less the first time, you think you've written it right, but you've obviously written it wrong because it doesn't work. But leaving room in your mind for the possibility that you're wrong is the most important thing you can do. You're convinced the hardware is faulty. There's nothing wrong with my code. There really isn't. The code is absolutely dead. It just refuses. It must be a dead 64. Give me another one. Yeah. A lot of stuff never seen, but jamming, completely unique game. Again, I rate it as my other favorite above Bozo's because. Again, it was fun. I just rated it as a good game. You could get the riff going, and it worked.
I'll be honest. I can actually remember buying jamming from, I think it was John Lewis's of all places in Glasgow. We never went to Glasgow because my family were from Edinburgh, and how I can't even think of the phrase, but anyway, we very rarely went to Glasgow. It was too far. But this one day we did go to Glasgow, and I had my pocket money, and I thought I want to get a computer game, and I saw jamming, and I bought it. And when I first loaded it, I was immediately disappointed with the graphics. And then I started playing it, and then I think before I know it, 5 hours had passed. And it's a great game. I was actually trying to play it, or maybe a couple of weeks ago, and I was struggling. I know roughly what you have to kind of do, but I'll need to get back into it. But it's a great game. I mean, it was quite unique because obviously you built up the sound. You would get one sort of voice, and then when you picked up, if you returned an instrument to the right color, you would get the second one kicked in. But if you got killed, you would get like all this reverb and all that kind of stuff. It was way ahead of its time, and I think I have to say there must have been some wacky substances taken at that point when that game was made, because it was like a dream that you had.
That's a great phrase. It was. But it was a giggle too, and it was so important that going to work was just not going to work. It was just going out of my door, and the Taskset was like 10 doors away from where I lived, and that was going to work. So I was just on the street having fun.
Yeah, and what was it? Did you have a little kind of outlet or an office or something that you all worked in, or?
Yeah, we had. It was a property where we worked on the first floor, which had been a flat at one stage. And oh gosh, the one thing we did there was above that was attics, the attic bedrooms. I'd got a Walters line printer for printing out the code, because it really was in those days. You wrote stuff and you needed printouts to work out where things were and where the errors could be.
Yeah.
And there's quite a lot of it. You know, it's a long printout, and you couldn't possibly wait for a little Epson printer to do that. I got this Walters printer, printed a line at a time, and it would burst print stuff out. They had to catch the paper coming out. This long spool of stuff would just come out here like 90 miles an hour, but it made a hell of a noise, and it thudded around like mad. It was like somebody walking and stamping their feet above your head when, Mark's needed a printout of of that bit of the pipeline or something. Wallop. Don't even think about making a telephone call at the moment.
Just to kind of go back a wee bit, Andy. So you were obviously you were making arcade games. At what point did you realise that this isn't really working? We need to look at, or did they kind of cross over? Was there a point where you were making arcade games and you kind of stepped your toe into the home computer market?
Yeah, definitely had them both going when we were working out of my house on High Street. It had been half a shop as well, so I'd taken over the shop. And the front of the shop was Taskset, and the back of the shop was Slogan Court, or the coin op side. So Tony Gibson and Andy Rickson and I were in the coin op side, with Paul Hodgson and Mark Buttery and Kim in the front, sorting out. We began with an Oric, because it was 6502, and a Vic 20. And it's while we were playing with those that we heard about Commodore launching a 64. Couldn't get them in England at the time, but we knew it was coming. And the fact that it had dedicated hardware, graphics and sound chips, I thought, well, if it's better than the Vic 20, it'll be pretty good. I thought, sounds pretty daft looking back on it, but the Oric was just an incredibly bad graphics system. It was teletype.
Really?
Yeah, it was all the attributes for the whole line of graphics was set in the first couple of bytes. So it was a serial graphics set. It was a nightmare for gaming. Worked well for text, which is why teletext used it. Oh God, was it difficult! And that was the first one that we wrote Dig Dog on, which was another jab in the ribs to Atari and Namco for Dig Dog.
You mentioned earlier on about Namco getting interested in the pit.
Yeah.
So did the pit come out before Dig Dug? Or
yeah,
I was going to say, it sounds like they plagiarised the pit and brought out Dig Dug, especially the bit where you blow up dragons as well.
It was, and that was the magic phrase. And it's also about why. I'll never hear a bad word against Joel Hochberg. He absolutely saved my bacon. He was. We were faced with this. We're going to sue your ass from Atari, who had very deep pockets and were suing us in the American courts. And you think, we're doomed. You know, there's no way out of this. When you actually look at Dig Dug, the final bit is like a stirrup pump, isn't it? Where you dig down, you find a dragon, and for some bizarre reason, you attach the airline to him and pump away on this little stirrup pump, and it explodes the dragon, inflates until he goes pop.
Yeah.
And that's a very literal translation of blows up the dragon. So suddenly we knew exactly where all of that has come from. And luckily for me, Joel had said, we're going to spend this money on registering the copyright in the States. You can't register copyright in the UK. It's just not a thing. It's automatically yours as you write it, but it's hard to prove. In the States, it's for registration, federal. So we spent all of these dollars on doing that. And when Atari were going to sue our ass, it turns out they had a copyright on Dig Dug, but the pit was 3 weeks earlier than theirs. So yeah, immediately you think, let's go and sue their ass instead.
So it does look awfully like that the pit could have possibly been the inspiration for Dig Dug.
It certainly does. That's a very, very diplomatic way of saying it.
Yeah.
So, and there was loads of others followed it, wasn't there? Like Mr. Do. That was again a great game, really fast and crisp. I loved it.
There's a comment down here by Ox, and he was saying here. There we go.
Yeah, Boulder Dash. Yeah,
quite an accolade. I mean, Boulder Dash is one of the best games ever. So you know, if this guy took his inspiration from the pit, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, and I've heard that said, and good on him, Peter. I know he said it as well. It is a great. I'll take my hat off to that, because the implementation of Boulder Dash was just special, wasn't it? It was just so crisp, and it worked. Again, it just worked.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just coming about by an error on Andromeda. That's all.
See, when you designed a game, Andy, what was the once you'd got your idea, right, I'm going to make a game, whatever it's going to be. What was the first thing you did?
Depends where it sprang from. I said that Pipeline started its life in coin-op. And again, it never sold commercially, but it was produced, and it was produced portrait. You remember how Pac-Man, you're running around on essentially the black bit between white barriers everywhere. So you're going around the back on the black bit. So supposing that we just invert that, so you're running around on the light bits, and initially you could fall off, and there were things that would push you off, and all sorts of things. But it was changing just a known format and saying, supposing we could get around there, but with I tell you, we were developing on Intertech Superbrain machines on this Xylec board that Chris Stamper had made, and we're sitting there in the back room of my house, and above it was a bathroom and that sort of thing, but there was a leak. There really was, and the pipe didn't actually burst, but it was leaking. And it came through the ceiling, and it just missed the keyboard of Tony Gibson's Intertech Superbrain machine. And, that would have sunk us, because we'd put all our money, all of the company's money, into the development kit. And turning out to fix the leak was my dad. He wasn't a plumber. He wasn't a plumber. He was just a DIY guy. But he always put this wee little brown coat on and his little bag of tools there. And he would come out and fix it. I said, right there, that's the game. You run this, it's a pipeline, it's full, it leaks, wallop. There you go. So I would never have planned it without.
Awesome. So it quite literally was inspired by a leak in your bathroom. That is,
yeah, absolutely. And
that is fantastic. And obviously the main character is your dad.
Yeah, Foreman Fred.
That is fantastic. Right, before I better crack on with some questions. Gaming since the 70s, Mr. Walker. Oh, it's Mr. Walker.
Oh.
First, I'd like to say a huge thank you. I love Taskset Games. My question to you is this: Super Pipeline 1 and 2 not were amazing, are amazing. They're still absolutely brilliant games. Why was there not a Super Pipeline 3? Because I think, Andy, I'm right in thinking that Pipeline was the only game to actually see a sequel. There was no other sequels made. What was the reason behind that? And was there a reason you never made Super Pipeline 3? What happened?
It is a great question, and I'm Andy. If I'm Mr. Walker, I'm in front of the judge or something. But it is a great question, because the answer is because I wasn't smart enough. I think if I'd had a business head, that's what I would have done. And like Mario, and suddenly Luigi on the scene as well, and you can create a whole brand out of this family that players take to their hearts. And I think that the characters in Pipeline would have been taken to their hearts, and we could have built on that, but we'd done it. You know what I mean? We've done that. There's more stuff in the ideas bag, and I really want to try this, and let's have a go at that. We dreamt up a game, things like Chevy Shuttle and things, which was half Chevy Camaro, half Space Shuttle. And it sounds daft, but it was really nice graphic, and it was fast as hell. It was really, really quick, but it never saw the light of day.
Yeah.
Because again, the market was collapsing around us, and if the market had stayed stable, we should have made Pipeline 3. So yeah, really good question.
Was there any ideas? Was it ever on like the sort of the planning table? Did you ever come up with any ideas? Well, we could introduce this into like. One thing, sorry, Andy, I was just going to say one thing that I always thought would have been nice is having a co-op two-player option. You could one of these can play as the little kind of apprentices that go and they basically do the hard work and get chased with the bloody lobster.
Yeah, yeah, nearly. But there was a sort of hybrid game. Oh, gosh, I can't even remember what it was called. But it was more like a platform. It wasn't really a platforms game. It was more of a travelator type thing, but at different rates. But it was two-player in that one was obviously a good guy and one was obviously a bad guy. And it was much, much more fun being the bad guy because you could, that that's where much later instead of collecting things, you could dump things in the way of the good guy. So he could be really on it and beating his own best time and be totally stuffed by the stuff you'd left just in where you know he's got to go. And again, I can't even remember the name of it. But it never saw the light of day. It didn't get beyond talking about. I remember one or two sketches, and it never really gelled beyond that. But that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to pit people either against the machine, which was always the bad guy, or you could be the bad guy and do slightly different things in different times.
Try and kind of scupper the sort of progress of the good guy type thing.
It was much more fun to actually cock it all up.
So you alluded to the fact that there actually was an arcade version of Super Pipeline.
Yeah.
And does that code not exist? I would give him a right arm to be able to play that.
No, it doesn't. But it ran on this Z80 Xylec board, and it was actually a Jalico board by then because Jalico had decided to actually commercially produce this multi-sprite super scrolly board.
Mm-hmm.
And I say that it was developed portrait, and the guys were still on this pipeline rather than in a maze. It was the reverse of that, like the negative of it. So people were racing about on there, and there were people trying to stop you from getting the leak fixed. They would come along and block your path, and you needed to leg them. But it wasn't honed enough. It wasn't enough of a good game to ever make it. So at that time, the arcade scene was folded, really.
Yeah.
Coin Op just went through the floor. So I was glad, really, really pleased that we'd put a finger in a toe in the water of home gaming, because it was.
I mean, before I had the pleasure of meeting you the first time, I mean, I always thought if there was a computer game that were absolutely fitted being in arcades, it was Pipeline. You know, it was made for the arcades. And then obviously after I got to speak to you, I found out that you had an arcade heritage. So that kind of makes a lot of sense. But it's interesting when you think about Pipeline. I mean, I would almost say no, don't make a Pipeline 3 because it's perfect. There's nothing about either of the two games that I would change. I mean, on paper, you know, there's a water flowing through a pipe and there's things come down and jam. It sounds dull, but I don't know what it is. It's just so playable, so playable. The music, the graphics, and one thing that I've always thought about a game, you've got to actually have a sort of like a connection with the thing that you're controlling, whether it's a Pac-Man or a robot or a person. There's been games in the past that I've played, and you're playing as some kind of thing, and I'm like, I don't like the thing that I'm controlling, and then I won't play the game. But there's something that I could sort of relate to with Super Pipeline. It's just a everyday Joe Blogs going to his work. My dad was a plumber. I mean, my dad was a plumber in real life, so I don't know whether that was part of it. little guys that were like you could sacrifice them. Oh, here's a lobster coming. Do you kind of leg it, or do you just make sure there's enough space so that he would get the lobster would take him, fall down, because you know that he wasn't dead anyway. He would just fall to the bottom of the screen, run off, and then he would come back on. So you weren't. I didn't feel too bad when I kind of sacrificed them, but obviously the second one. So what was different from the first one to the second one? You had the two kind of, I call them apprentices. You had the two wee guys that would kind of help you. The graphics were, I suppose you would say they were better. I mean, the original sort of pipeline, it's like expanded sprites extraordinaire, which is almost a kind of limitation of the hardware. But CAD Cam Warrior was one of the first games that I saw that had the black outline, so they looked really nice. And then obviously the baddies in like Super Pipeline 2 had that kind of outline, so they did look kind of crisper looking.
Yeah, it was. It's all a development, and I think really from the outset, I think that's why Taskset worked generally for the UK market, was because at CoinOp you couldn't have errors in it if you were charging them money. It couldn't just go wrong or go off the screen and get lost somewhere. And it had to have a high score table, and that had to work. So there were very, very few errors in those Taskset games. They would work. Pipeline 2 was a refined version of it. It was sharper. The the relationship between the foreman and the plumbers and the apprentices was, it's a bit of elastic, isn't it? Where you set off and then they sort of catch you up. There's quite, and then they'd sort of all bunch up together again. And it's not maths; it's only arithmetic going on in that. But moving forward by partial bits. So you needed to save up the bits of a bit to move and accelerate them and decelerate them. So there was quite a lot going on in just the way they moved, but it had to work. And well, anything that's bigger than 1K of assembler, it's got errors in it. There's a bug in there somewhere. You just haven't found it yet. It only matters whether you see it in the final product or not.
Yeah.
But I think there was fewer in Taskset than there were in many around at the same time. If you had the game, it would work.
Yeah. Actually, you've just kind of listening to you talking there. You've hit upon something which I would say is an important ingredient of a game, which I forgot about when I did that video a few weeks ago, and it's frustration. There's got to be an element of frustration to make a game. Bastard, one more time. I mean, Pipeline's one of these games. I can't think of any other game that's like it. With Pipeline, Super Pipeline, you can maybe run through the first 3 or 4 screens, absolutely no problem. But what happens if one of the baddies gets through and drops a rivet, then you're trying to get that unblocked, and then before you know it, there's a flea coming down, and then it just turns into an absolute mayhem. And I've seen me playing one particular level of Super Pipeline or Pipeline 2, and I've been playing it for 10 minutes, and I'm determined I'm going to do it. And then at the very last minute, you die. You bastard! And you're shouting at the apprentices because you move them to unblock something, and then you start to kind of run the other way, and then he follows you. Get back over there! It's like real life. And it's just
interaction. Oh, that is proper interaction. We got you. We definitely got you at that moment, and that's that there's hours of test play gone into it. And if you're brassed off and pissed off with it, that's quite different from being frustrated, like you say, because you can do it. And the number of times that you'll go back and have that next go, because this time I won't make that mistake yet. I'll definitely do this different. If you go back to it, it's a good game.
Yeah, right. It's a bit like spinning plates in reverse. You can end up with like 3 rivets, or you end up with 4 rivets, and there's always one at the very bottom, right beside the little barrel that you're filling.
Yeah.
And you get it down to one. You're like, oh, I'm going to do it, and then the next guy comes up and drops. Ah, for fuck's sake! And then the water's running out. So it's like spinning plates, and it can all come crashing down. But it's a simple game, and that's what makes a game. It's just it's that's why it's a game. There are very few. I've always said this, and I don't know whether you'd agree. There was some fantastic games that came out back in the early 80s and mid 80s, whatever it was. I would say that the bulk of like 8-bit games, they're they're not going to hold your attention for any more than a couple of minutes. You'll load up a game and go, oh yeah, okay. Pipeline is Super Pipeline 1 and 2 are still two games I will load up and just play because they're that good.
I am honestly humbled, but really pleased that somebody else sees in it what we saw, because it's not me. It really was the team, and it was. I know it's a bit different when it's your company, but I just loved going to work, and it was. People were usually there ahead of me as well, because I like to think they liked it a lot as well. We did meet up many, many years later, and they did say that they did. But it was such a great atmosphere. It's always different when the industry is collapsing around you.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you can't write. It just means you can't sell.
Yeah.
And it's that difference, that there was still some really good stuff in the ideas bag. But gosh, you said you'd bought a version early doors from John Lewis, and they were really good customers. But the bigger wholesalers, the WH Smiths and the Boots, were selling software like mad, and then they had wholesalers they would only buy from warehouses rather than direct. And everybody's margin just meant, there was nothing in it. I couldn't pay the lads, couldn't get stuff done. It's a difficult time when the market's collapsing. And I think if I'd been better at business and really churned the handle, we could have had Pipeline 3 much earlier and not done some of the more experimental or off the wall stuff, and just concentrated. Said, we've got a product here, just turn the handle and do the next one.
Yeah.
And it should have made us more money.
So do you think, and I hope you don't take this disrespectfully, you were a geek first and foremost. You loved games, you loved your electronics. You were the guy that made these things, but you probably needed like a Dave Ward, like the Ocean had, a businessman who had no interest in video games, but he was able to obviously make a successful business. You were a bunch of geeks who just loved what you were doing. You made the games, you played the games, but you didn't have any business acumen, and that was because you're just you were making it up as you went along. So do you think if you'd had somebody that maybe had a bit of experience, things could have worked out differently?
Yeah, it's absolutely spot on, because I'd spent the previous 10 years as an electronics geek, working in, all over the world, but not in business. I worked for the Foreign Office, and I didn't need to know any business. And when I set things up, it was because I thought, I can make this, I can do this. I have no idea what a balance sheet was, for goodness sake. I'm not interested. But I know how many machine cycles there are on that opcode, and that was much more important. So, yeah, there was a lot to learn. And, I guess I'm still learning. I still don't like business things, so I'd much rather have a giggle.
I mean, one of the things, and again, I'm not just saying this because you're here, and I've said this time and time again, as everyone in the stream will agree with. Super Pipeline, the two Pipeline games were and they're the only two games, only two 8-bit games where I play and I still laugh every time you complete level 1 of Super Pipeline 2. I don't know what it is. It's like is it Monty Mole that's in the Sinclair C5, and then the little apprentice comes out and just batters on my hammer, and then he runs off. And then you get obviously the three of them they're walking off, and next minute this big busty blonde appears and then they go. I mean, you wouldn't get away with that now, obviously. But you
God,
know, the humour that went into these games, and even now, I do laugh out loud. It brings a smile to my face. It's fantastic. It's never aged at all. I don't know how many times I've seen the same clips over and over again, but it's pure carry on. You know, British postcards
it
humour.
is.
It's fantastic.
There's no malice in it, is there? There's nothing nasty. Or
No,
I know
no.
you wouldn't get away with it now, but Anne was my secretary. She ran all of the admin and did the letters. But I'm not going to miss her off the little, the interscene stuff. She's got to be there, and she is. But none of it was there was no dark side to it, was there? It was just there in front of you, and it's coming. Yeah, it's not the first time you've played it. You know it's coming, and it's still good. Well, I'm really pleased because that. Do you know they didn't tell me? A lot of that was Mark Buttery, and he and Andy Rickson had generally been working on this stuff. Obviously, when I was what was laughingly known as my office underneath all of the all of the development kit and stuff. There was just room for a keyboard and an output screen. But while I was there or on the phone to a supplier or something really boring, they were working away on something. And I didn't see it. It wasn't in the early cuts of it at all. I didn't see it until that section worked. I never saw that bit in prototype. And they dared to leave it in my trial version. It just fall about on the fly. And I know it's silly. It's not very adult, is it? But it was funny. Keep it.
Was there any? Yeah. Was there any point you thought we might offend somebody with that? We better take them out.
No, not at all. Passed the test. If we laughed, that was good enough.
Aye.
Yeah, straight away. I don't. Much the same for Bozos, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That's the same pattern. That we knew we couldn't call it alcohol because it was the 80s, wasn't it? You weren't allowed to do that sort of thing, and it would kill your sales if you did. So again, you've written something really nice, but if nobody else can see it, that's a bit of a shame, isn't it?
We've got another question for Ox. He is asking, what is your favourite game and genre from back in the day?
Oh, well, for Coin-Op Defender, sorry, I've already said that. Gosh, there are so many. Jeff Minter again. Most of the stuff, we were still playing with feedback loops in software when he released Attack of the Mutant Camels. I'm not sure if you remember the way the craft zooms backward and forward and accelerates and dives. And that arithmetic was really interesting. What a pathfinder that was. Grid Runner was a great game. That sort of stuff where, again, they were pretty much first. But we had a hell of an advantage, though, didn't we? Because the industry was so young that anything that you think of is suddenly a unique game because there hasn't been time.
Yeah. It's like walking in the snow for the first time. It doesn't matter. Yeah, that's you're making the footprints. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely that. Yeah. So we were just very, very fortunate people, weren't we?
Did you have much of a relationship with other coders at all? Because obviously this was before the internet. Anyone that's younger than 30 years old, there was actually a time there was no such thing as the internet. I mean, the only time you'd really how did you become aware of other people? Was it when you bought Zap magazine or?
Yeah. The magazines were absolutely critical. Zap was very, very kind to us. They really were. PCW was a laugh. Had a cartoon on the back always, didn't it? That was a good magazine. But Zap was the big colour reviews, really interesting. Then you get the shows. People would just turn up and rent a tabletop. Yeah. And you go down with boxes of stuff and sell it, and people would buy it, and that's fine.
I remember Andrew Hewson. I was lucky enough to talk to Andrew Hewson, and he said that the first time they went to a computer show, they had a wallpaper table, and they just put out all their cassettes, and people were just thrusting all these £5 notes, and then they
Yeah,
got back to the hotel and they're like, "Look at all the money we've made!"
yeah,
they couldn't
yeah.
they couldn't believe it.
It was, and even before we got to the shows, we would sell mail order,
Yeah,
Pipeline One and Cosmic Convoy and Jammin' and that sort of thing. The wife here, she was sticking the labels on the cassettes. We just had a duplicating machine on the kitchen table again, and we would just do that, and people would send us postal orders, which is as good as cash, and they would just send that in the post, and we'd just put it in an envelope with a little "Join the Taskset Club" sticker on it, and post it back to them. So there was probably altogether a 3 or 4 day turnaround that they'd just launch money at us, and 3 or 4 days later they'd be loading the game. And that's the way it worked. When it was like that, there were no there was no Mr. 10%. There was no wholesaler. You went straight to the guy who wanted it, and that's fine.
yeah. I remember. I think in fact, I think you took part in it. Bedrooms to Billions, and Mel Croucher, who was Automata Software. He said that then the businessmen moved in, and that's when everything changed. The money men, oh, there's money to be made, and you were getting people who weren't really interested in the computer industry. It was all about margins and about making money.
Yeah,
And
that was pretty sad.
yeah, yeah, and Jeff Minter did say that when that happened, he felt quite sad because he was never wanting to become a part of a big corporation, and to this day, Jeff and Giles still together, still knock out all these fantastic games.
Uh,
Just I,
it's great bumping into him at shows. It
yeah,
really is.
I was well. Obviously, you took part in my charity stream whenever it was. Was it it was November the 5th.
Yeah,
Actually, it was bonfire night. And I managed to get Jeff and Giles. I've been after Jeff and Giles for a long time, but he's ridiculously. He'll never reply to emails. He doesn't message you. He doesn't. He's impossible to get a hold of. But I actually bumped into him. I was down at the Zap Live event last year, and he was standing outside. I had a wee blether with him because I kind of knew him because I was a member of his Yak Jack forum, which sprung up in 1998, and so he kind of knew of me. But anyway, we had a wee chat, and then obviously I messaged him about the live stream, and he came on. Him and Giles came on for a couple of hours, and it was brilliant because he's like yourself. He's just a down to earth bloke who he's written some fantastic games, and he's a gamer first and foremost. He's got no, there's none of this self importance. Just when we're talking about Zap, I want to share a little picture. Let me see if I can do this. Okay, let's like window. A wee second, right? Where the hell is it? Screen two. Hopefully you can. Hopefully you can see that. There's a
Oh,
rather dapper Mr. Walker. Look at that, you there.
oh gosh, yeah, I remember him. Yeah. Funnily enough, he's not in the mirror now when I'm shaving.
Was that what? Is that your car, or was that just somebody's car you
No,
were
no,
sitting on?
that was me Chevy Camaro. Yeah, I did enjoy that. Yeah, something like
Nice.
a small block 5 litre V8. Not very, not very good for the planet.
I take it you've not got that anymore, no?
No, 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 no. Again, it was of its time. Had ridiculously big rear wheels, looked like a funny car. But when you think there were cross-ply tires on a live rear axle, so it just wouldn't corner; it would spin instead.
And there's what you said. Now, bear in mind, this was in issue 1 of Zap. I'll try and read that out because it's quite blurred. There's still, I think, what they were asking you was, what do you think of the Commodore 64? And you said here, there's still no doubt in my mind that the C64's hardware is still the best home computer hardware for games that exists. It's the fact that they bothered with 2 special chips, which you mentioned earlier, the SID chip and the VIC-20 chip. When you look at the screen capabilities, there's nothing to touch it. Take the screen speed of the Amstrad compared with the C64, there's no comparison. And on the Atari, there are only 4 meaningful sprites compared with 8 in the 64. And as for the Spectrum, what can I say? Sorry, Spectrum viewers. Once the hardware people got their job right, the software just follows it. It makes it so easy. I think the release of the Commodore 128 will add to the strength of the Commodore 64, provided Commodore get their prices right. Well, we knew that never happened. They can keep the 64 on 229 as it's supposed to be at the moment. The C64 has such a big user base now, it's just not going to go away. And there you go. That was in 1985, and I think they're still making games in 1995, and they're still making games even now. Certainly, in a year's time, there will still be stacks of software being released. In 2 years' time, well, that's a lifetime in this industry. But my feeling is it'll still be a strong machine then. You were absolutely on the money there, Andy. My feeling is that those C64s which are out there are actually being used. I mean, I know quite a few people with Spectrums who only use them once in a blue moon, whereas those with C64s do use them a lot. The fact is, the C64 is the world's most written for machine. There's a staggering number of titles available for it. What this means is that the user wins because standards have to be so high. So yeah, obviously you knew exactly what you're talking about, and there we are. All these years later, it's still a thing.
That's very kind. I'm very rarely correct about things. I'm going to great crystal ball, otherwise I'd have seen all the problems ahead. But 64, what a machine! And you can tell that the chipset was developed by gamers. Even the things that they understand why scrolling was important, why you didn't have to do it in software. We were back to wiggling the pins on the chips again. If you could really get the best out of those two chips, then that was all of your platform problems gone, because it would solve them for you. And you look at the way that our Paul Hodgson and people, the masters like Rob Hubbard and the like, can do whole demos, and that demo scene is so vibrant even today.
Oh yeah.
And, there's a tribute to Rob Hubbard in Hull, just down the road from me, about 30 miles from here. I'm going to go and find it and find out its exact position on what 3 words. The
oh yeah. I know it's instead of I know exactly what you're talking about. 3 words shows you the location of something. Yeah.
Absolutely. Narrows it down to 3 meters anywhere on the planet. And I've got to find it because it's a decorated telecom distribution box at the side of the road, and that one is dedicated to Rob Hubbard. I thought, God, in Hull, what an enlightened lot they must be in Hull. I thought, but it only gave a really rough location, so I am going to make it. It's like a pilgrimage almost. I'm going to find it and map it. But it comes back to the quality of those chips in the first place.
Yeah.
Because having the nous to be a chip manufacturer in those days was, that was a big risk. The benefits are tremendous, but the risk of setting something like that, the dollars involved was just eye-watering stuff. And then make a real successful chipset as well. You didn't just do it; they did it really well. And that's, I think it was Atari that designed them, wasn't it? Wasn't Commodore. I think
you're probably right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And Jack Tramiel bought it because he had a chip manufacturing plant and he could churn the handle and knock them out. So again, proper business that was, and we all benefited.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there about you reckon it'll go for a long time. I mean, I don't know if you've seen any of the kind of like the latest kind of demos that have come out in the last 3-4 years and games. I mean, they're still making brand new games, and there's some games now that you look at and you're like, that is just mind blowing. I mean, I put up a demo that had been written by this kind of group, and I was running it on a Mister, which is like a little device, and it kind of replicates hardware like
Oh,
99.9999% accurately, because it's so much easier for when I'm doing my streams. But I put this demo on the Mister, and I made a video out of brought a video out showcasing it, and I had quite a few people saying that it's never been done in a Commodore 64. That's
yeah.
impossible. And I actually thought, you know what, he might be right. And I've got a beige bread bin Commodore 64 on my floor underneath that TV, and I loaded it up, and it works, and it's like, how on earth can they actually get something like that running on something that came out in like 1982? It's just mind blowing, absolutely mind blowing what they're doing now. It's incredible.
It is, and it goes back to what you were asking about the difference between pipeline 1 and 2.
Mm,
The more that you learn how to run these chips, I'll give you a really quick nerdy bit that the interrupt structure wasn't implemented by many people. Not every game ran it. Our games were locked to the frame rate. So the video blank interrupt drove everything because you knew where the spot was at the time. And if you didn't know where the spot was, it could be updating while the screen was being redrawn. And that means that the graphics sort of slip horizontally very slightly, but your eye sees it every single time. And although it's quicker not to lock yourself to 50 hertz, it's troublesome and it uses machine cycles that you could use other ways. But still, when you lock to that, you're driving the whole game from the point of view of what the user will see. And it's that whole approach that you're actually in control of that circuit board, and it will do exactly what you want, and the spot won't interrupt it. So the graphics are true every time. And that produced flicker-free stuff. And again, in that time, gosh, it sounds so rudimentary now, but in its
yeah.
time, that was the same thing. You look at it and think, how have they got away with no flicker? And the answer is that they've locked it to that. The chances are that they are also counting machine cycles because you know where the spot is. And at that time, it's right at the very top left corner of the screen. So anything you want to do on the screen has got to be well out of range of where the spot is. So by counting the machine cycles in the routines that were driving either the main character or looking at the joystick, whatever it's doing, you knew you had time to execute that routine before the spot was going to interrupt what you were trying to update on the screen. So it was early days, but the more that you knew the chipset, the more you wanted people's jaw to drop when they saw it. And that's what you saw with that latest demo. What the hell are they? Somebody is counting machine cycles there.
Yeah. And they're even, I think, from what I gather, I mean, I'm a complete twat when it comes to technology. I just consume games and talk about them. But there's artwork that appears in some of these demos, and there's colours. It displays colours that don't actually exist, and I don't know whether it's stuff like, I know like Martin Galway and all these like Rob Hubbard and what have you. Obviously the SID had 3 channels, but then through flicking very quickly between 2 sounds, they could give the impression of more channels. And I think that's what they managed to do when it came to graphics. So we're able to like create colors by just flicking between maybe green and red very fast, and then you get a purple or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But I don't know how they do it, but it's mind blowing, absolutely mind blowing.
Yeah, they'll get the same kick of seeing that run that we were still getting back in the Taskset development room days. When you see it and it runs, and the guy does that, or maybe his nose is just wobbling about a bit, or there's something there that you said that was worth investing that time in because that works.
Yeah, phenomenal. I've got a question here, not game related. Jamie's asking, what kind of red wine do you like?
This one's the nearest one in the cupboard. It happens to be a Merlot, and it's not very expensive, so I will call it good value rather than excellent. Thank you.
Right, and I think I did kind of ask that. Are any of your game characters based on real people? You've obviously said that your dad was the main star
Yeah.
attraction. Did he have a huge big nose as well? Big bulbous
No,
nose? No?
no, he didn't. No, but he had that coat on, and he was there fixing the pipes when we needed him. That was enough. But yeah, he's based on that. Yeah.
Was there any other characters that appeared in games that were kind of based on somebody that you knew, or maybe somebody that lived in Bridlington, or oh yeah.
I'm trying to think in Souls of Darkon if there was anybody there. There was a cheat. There was a cheat based on my brother's American Express card. There was a really complicated scene where you were needing to collect some credits or other to bribe somebody to point you the way to the next station, or you could just ask the question, American Express, and that would do suddenly. So, yeah, no, I think that's about the nearest one in there. I think. Oh yeah, of course there were. Yeah, Seaside Special, of course. There was Maggie Thatcher in that one, getting radioactive seaweed thrown at her.
That was slightly political, wasn't it? It was slightly
Oh,
sort of, yeah.
yeah, very political. Tony Gibson and I fell out badly over that. We really did. But he wanted to write it, and he would write it. That's fine. Very, very much so. Like Bozo's was really Tony. His basic ideas. All sorts of other people have a go, and in the same way that all the way back to jamming as well.
Yeah.
That he didn't write the underlying music drivers or anything, but he knew what he wanted as a game, and it was the game that people were playing. Yeah.
Obviously, Super Pipeline 2 and Souls of Darkon, they were the only two games that I'm aware of that came out. They were the last two kind of games that came out in 1985. Excuse me. And these were also the only two games that I'm aware of that got ported. I think they both came out for the Amstrad and the Spectrum. At what point did you decide? Because am I right in thinking you didn't do anything on the VIC 20? You never was the C64 the first computer you programmed for?
Yeah, we did do work. Mark Buttery, especially. We did a lot of experimental work on the VIC 20 because again, it was 6502, which I still loved from my Tangerine days, even though all the coin op stuff was basically Z80. So when it came to wanting to do the same game across other titles, Z80 was back in the frame again. And again, I think it was, it's not a great business idea. We should have done the next game. We should have done Pipeline 3, just like your man there said.
Yeah.
That's what we should have done. And we weren't smart enough or quick enough because the door was closing really rapidly on what you could make, not just make a living out of, but sell at all. Yeah.
I've got a question from Arlosoft now, just to give you a wee bit of background information, Andy. Arlosoft is my friend Nick Sherman. Now, Nick quite literally only got into programming Commodore 64s about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and he has been putting out. I was mentioning about some new games that are coming out that are just astonishing. He has put out like a perfect version of Galaxian. He's put out the best version you could get of Galaga, and this is a true anecdote. One of my favourite arcade games is Berserk, and one of my friends, a guy called Steve Snake, who's done quite a lot of programming. He did a lot of 8-bits. He did like Rodland and that for the C64. I was mentioning to Steve about he knew that I liked Berserk, and then a couple of weeks later he goes, "I've sent you an email, mate," and he sent me across a game that he'd written in the Spectrum called Robot Horus and the robots, and it is the perfect version. It is an arcade perfect version of Berserk in the Spectrum, including speech. And I'm like, wow, just unbelievable. And then that was about maybe 3-4 years ago. And then last year, I was talking to Arlisoft, Nick, and we got in a bit of a debate about what is the best version of Berserk. And somebody says, oh, there's a version of Berserk called, is it Berserk Redux? And I went, I'm sorry, I says, Berserk Redux is a nice game, but it's nothing like Berserk. It's completely different. The graphics look different, blah, 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 blah. And I said, the Commodore 64 can't do the best version of Berserk. The Spectrum is where it's at. So then Nick went away. About a week later, he went, I've sent you, what do you think of this? And he has written, I would bet my mortgage if I was to show you the arcade Berserk and the Nick's version of Berserk running side by side, apart from the speech, because obviously, it's the C64 is not going to replicate the speech. Yeah. It is absolutely indistinguishable. It is phenomenal. So Nick has done some incredible games for the live stream. He agreed to he had 2 weeks to write Burger Time, and he's written again. If I showed you it side by side with arcade, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. He wrote this game in 2 weeks, and I think we made something like £300 for the charities. People were buying this game, so he's an absolute cracking guy. So Nick knows exactly what he's talking about. So I'll let you read the question there.
That's fantastic. Did I prefer working with home computers or on the bleeding edge with arcade hardware? Well, gosh, at its time, when arcade hardware was, I suppose, 1981, when you're looking at the development of arcade hardware, my jaw was just hitting the desk all the time. You think, oh God, look what they've done. Sega were leading the charge then, weren't they? I think.
Yeah.
Sega just they'd done the research and they put the development in, but the Xylec board would give it a really good run for the money, and it was such a shame that industry was burning out, just as that sort of hardware was becoming better and better and better, and people were using it better. Because when you think what they got out of a Z80 on whatever it was, 2 meg clock at its fastest at the time, and it was only with really smart hardware layouts when there was no VIC chip for them. The Jalico board, which was the Xylec board, really would use an awful lot of direct memory access, and the DMA finding the time to go and get what you wanted out of memory and display it was always the limiting factor. And when companies were coming out with custom chips to do that, they was just stealing a march on everything. That was a fantastic time to be. You knew you wouldn't catch up. You were always a few. I'm not sure whether it was years. I think it's more like to be just months behind the curve. But that was like a generation. It was everything was moving so fast at the time that when we first heard about the 64, we knew that's where we need to be, because that's the one. When it landed, it was so stable. There was quite a lot of strange sets of machines there that were really flaky at 50 hertz and were never obviously UK oriented. But that's the real market changed so fast to home games. And then that market itself only had a few years. It was a really short time, wasn't it? So there wasn't time to really get to grips with what can be done. That's why I take my hat off to your man there at Arla, because it's dedication to develop. He's obviously got the toolkits to develop stuff at that speed. And that means he's put in the long hours, hasn't he? somewhere he's just been writing utilities that will help that development rate, because there isn't time to actually type that many opcodes in, is there? You've got to be using, and if they're his own utilities, then he knows them inside out and he can modify them on the fly to do even better. But the next generation stuff will floor you again, because it sounds like he's not going to stop. He's going to go on. Next time you'll get, a Christmas card off him and you think, how the hell does that work?
It's insane. I say some of the games that have been getting put out over the last couple of years, if these games had existed back in 1985, it would have blown your mind. It really would have. It's incredible.
Yeah, but it's time and long hours spent somewhere. Somebody's done it, and if it is him, Nick, you said, and if it is him, only he knows that. But somebody's recognised the output from that and said, "Christ, that's good. Christ," and he's probably happy as Larry with that, isn't he? You've got to be proud of it. And I think there's a lot of people that write stuff, whether it gets published or not. And then if you're happy with it and you're really pleased with what you've written, that's great. I'm sitting here in what's laughingly known as my office, which I'd constructed because I was definitely going to write some books. And that was 7.5, 8 years ago now. And yeah, I haven't got a complete chapter written yet. Other stuff gets in the way, doesn't it?
I know that only too well. Right, another quick question for you, Andy.
Yeah, modern consoles. Gosh, I am so far out of touch. Here's the admission. I don't have time. Time is the biggest enemy I've got. I can. I just said there to Alan on the way in. I just got in, poured myself a glass, switched the laptop on. Here I am. Because it's just been one of those days again. I start at about 5 in the morning and find a couple of hours to take dogs on the beach in the meantime. But time I don't have. I wish I could. I knew I was old when my grandchildren could beat me at Crash Bandicoot. That was the measuring stick. I could beat them. Oh, Christ, they're growing up. They've beaten me.
Just bet them on Defender, mate. I'm sure you'll kick their arse.
Yeah. No, one day in my dreams.
Yeah. So, are you still working these days, Andy? What are you, if you don't mind, tell me what are you doing with yourself these days? And are you still like tinkering at all with hardware and software?
No, not really. I retired a couple of years ago at about age 73 when I retired because I went and got elected in 2019. So I'm a politician as well now.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
And then I got re-elected in May 23. So I spend a lot of my time at County Hall dealing with, there you go, East Riding of Yorkshire Council and unitary systems and 1,000 square miles to look after. And yeah, interesting times, but it means I have no time. So it wasn't fair. I was working still in gaming and writing casino machines, designing the different casino machines, still winning it. But again, I had 3 or 4 engineers working with me, and Carnaby Gaming was really very successful, punched over its weight greatly for years because I had a great MD. It wasn't my company or anything. I was just an employed person. But a couple of really, really smart engineers and an MD who wanted to invest in R&D. And he did. And again, tiny little company. And we're taking on the likes of Gauselman and the other casino companies, Atronics and the like, and still go to an international show and pick up an award. and that's great. That's just, again, makes you feel good, doesn't it? Doesn't do anything. It just sits in a cupboard, but it does mean that we brought something to the market. And again, it's a really, really harsh scheme, is coin-op casino, because if they don't like it, nobody will play it. That's it. And it doesn't matter what color you paint it or do anything else with it. If they don't like it, it's just not a good game. It'll take no money whatsoever.
Got to grab you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get as much satisfaction out of like programming these as you did writing things like Super Pipeline 2?
Yeah. I must admit I did, because again, still up until 3 years ago, my preferred arrangement was writing in assembler. Still, wrote the operating system for the machines, and wrote the games on top of it. Lived by Excel, really, because the casino is all about the odds.
Yeah.
The long game, and maybe over 10 million plays, you'll find out it has returned a true 8% to the owner. But at times, it won't be returning anything to him, and he's just got to learn to stick with it. Again, it is honestly true that a good game is still a good game there. And if it's not a good game, you just put it in the bin, write another one. Yeah. But having fun.
Yeah, as I say, the fact that we're still playing games like Super Pipeline 2, 40 years on, says it all. Do you think we'll ever see? I mean, I'm kind of split with this. I mean, you'll get sort of remakes and modern machines and what have you. I remember when the Xbox 360 first came out, they released all these like arcade games like Gyrus and Track and Field, and you could either play it with the pixel original graphics or you could have it with enhanced graphics, and it just looked wrong. And I don't know whether I'd want to play Super Pipeline on my Xbox or my PlayStation 5. Probably not. I don't know. Do you think they would ever? Do you think we can ever see a sequel to Super Pipeline? Who owns the rights to that game now? Then, Andy, is it yourself?
It's out of copyright. It's free for all. Some people still write to me, especially from Germany. Did you have a look in Messenger again? I sent you a link from Patrick. Just after it got on, because it's a strange coincidence. He's in Germany, and the first time I'd ever heard of him was an hour before I got on here. I was sat in a meeting about how many security people we needed on the doors of an event. It's nothing to do with gaming and not much to do with councils either. But he just dropped, and just like that, he said, "Oh yeah, because we know your Taskset games over here in Germany as well." Oh, that's really sweet. Yeah, I'll answer him tomorrow. But it just means that wherever there's stuff to do, if we can just concentrate on what's a good game, always, then it doesn't matter whether it was coin-op or whether it's home computing. And latterly, I did 20 years really developing for the casinos, and not always slot machines. Did some really strange vortex machines with real live pool balls involved and motors and things. So awfully strange stuff. But the odds were right. Absolutely terrific game. There's people will play it, and if they all agree. There's very few people will agree that what I think is a good game, a definitive good game, there won't be a groundswell against it. It's just that I can't find the formula for it. If there was a formula, I'd write the next one tomorrow and another one the day after that. And no, it fall on the keyboard, and sometimes it comes out really well.
Yeah. Sometimes you need a leaky bath to come up with a fresh game. So, is there any game that exists that you wish you had written apart from Defender?
Oh, Oh, yeah.
apart from Defender.
Gosh almighty, you're making me work for it now, aren't you? That's really, really tough. I think it might be things like Grid Runner, to be honest. I really, really, when you play it over and over and over, there's more. I don't have any memory anymore.
Yeah. You do know the definitive version of Grid Runner is on the VIC-20.
Yes, yeah,
That's
you're
the
absolutely
version
right.
to
Yes,
play.
you're 100%.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree.
What was interesting? In fact, Jeff mentioned we were talking about it in the stream last November, but Jeff brought out a game. I can't remember what it's called. It was based on an arcade game that Atari were going to release, and then the rating that wasn't good enough. Arc something or another, doesn't matter. But Jeff actually wrote some of the sound effects on the VIC-20 for this new game, because I would agree that the VIC-20, that the C64 is, there is no competition when it comes to the sound. The SID chip is phenomenal. I mean, there's I could let you listen to some music in that, and you wouldn't believe that it was a SID chip. And it's
Yeah,
only because I can play it on that I know it is. I personally think, whilst I never had whilst I never had a VIC-20, I believe that the VIC-20 it was better at doing sound effects. It really was. It had a great processor for sound effects.
yeah, yeah, and that's really where we were picking up when trying to set up Taskset to start with. Say the Dig Dog was Oric, and I'm trying to remember. Gosh, we had an early version that Mark was working away on the VIC-20 when we were trying to get our hands on a 64. But there was very little overlap. There was no time really when we were writing for the VIC-20 when we didn't know that the 64 was on its way. So it wasn't that dedicated target for us. I'm trying to think what else we were looking at the time, because there was a whole raft of stuff going on. But we looked at Z80, Spectrum, obviously, the little black squish board. There it is, and that, I tell you, the stuff again. People like Ultimate did stretch it, didn't they? They're just, again, you look at it and you think, yeah, there's some real quality there. And their whole setup was great. They left Xylec in their wake, didn't they? In the dust behind them as they went off into the distance, and then formed Rare and went from strength to strength on that.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was a small clique of people, because my old mate Joel Hochberg was heavily invested in Rare as well. So it was a really small band of people that were just, if you're in early enough, like you said earlier, you're making the footprints, aren't you?
Yeah. So, whilst I think it's fair to say that you guys you weren't actually in the industry for a long time. It was quite a short kind of space of time that you were in it. But do you have any regrets about being there at the very start? I mean, I think as a consumer of games, I'm blessed. I don't like being old, but I'm blessed that I was there at the very, very, very start of this whole thing, from hearing a Space Invaders machine. I think, what the hell is that? Why are all these people crowded around this wardrobe? And I'm like, what? I push my way through, and I'm like, what's this? I'm like, what's going on here? And then I noticed that the guy was pressing a button, and then this thing was moving. I'm like, this guy's actually interacting with the TV, and it just woof. And here I am. I'm 56 years old. I'm still like a child talking about video games. I still get excited. It'll never leave me. It'll never leave me. So it must have been wonderful to actually be part of that thing, because you were at the very, very start of this whole thing, Andy.
It was a magical time, and I'm just such a lucky fella. That is what it boils down to. But I was sitting back in the Cheltenham days, playing with a 4-bit and then an 8-bit development board, and computers were things that outputted on terminals in green text on a black screen. And I was battling away saying, what we need here is, do you not understand what we can do with this? And it was like I was nuts. It wasn't that they thought I was being just loud and obnoxious. It was that they genuinely didn't understand. They didn't have the same picture in their mind that I had as to why this was great and why the interaction was the key thing. And that goes back to another reason why I think that Taskset was well received in the public. It was we strove, absolutely dedicated to making crisp decisions off the joystick. That it's still worse. I've got a VW electric car now, and the console in the middle is diabolical software. It's awful. You can be driving along and you're not supposed to take your eyes off the road, but you've got to see what it's saying now. And you tap the screen and nothing happens. So you tap it again and then it does something twice. And you think, you bloody idiot. And that's how many years do you not understand the idea of interaction here? And they're back at fundamentals because it's based on Windows, not Android or iOS or something nice and crisp. It's based on Windows, for Christ's sake, because VW set up their factory next to where Microsoft were. And you think, Christ, if it doesn't react the first time, what are you going to do? You're obviously going to press it again. And now it's trying to dial somebody that you don't want to talk to on the phone. And you end up, you're shouting back at the screen when you're supposed to be looking after this zebra crossing ahead. And it's nuts. They haven't, there's so many places where software isn't right yet, and they should have learned out of the games industry. Because if you tried that on a 64, nobody will play the game. They just will not play it. So it's simple fundamentals. And in the casino, you can't press that button twice because you've released 2 pool balls now, you idiot. Why the software's got to be crisp. And if it isn't, it won't take any money. So still lots to learn.
No, Andy, I like to try and end this. I like to annoy people who have OCD. It's literally coming up to 2 hours, so I'm going to end this just before it gets to 2 hours. I'm actually looking. I'm just wanting to look for something just as a testament to the game. Let's see if I can find it. Just bear with me. I'm looking at my channel. I've got in fact, hang on a wee second. Just bear with me. Super Wi-Fi. There I go. Yep, I came up with a feature on my channel called Why I Love, and then it would be a game. And the first game that I picked was Super Pipeline, and that was the 1st of February 2016. So you might have not been involved in the industry for a long time, Andy, but you're still bringing a lot of fun and love to a lot of people with the games. And I think it's fair to say, just looking at all the lovely comments that have been in tonight, you know what I mean? On behalf of everybody, every C64 fan, thank you so much for doing what you're doing. And I'm genuinely elated that I can play a game like Super Pipeline 2, whatever, and I'm getting to talk to him on my channel. I'd like to think you're a mate. How awesome is that? You know what I mean?
You definitely are. And your heart's in the right place, but I am genuinely humbled. And I know the boys from Taskset are exactly the same.
Yeah.
And they just they didn't know they were part of that at the time. It was just that's how it was. But it was a magical time. And in the same way now that you think, will somebody make a new film that nobody's ever seen before? Well, there are still some really good stories out there, aren't there? And they still appear on film.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's plenty of room for Alasoft and the rest to keep stretching the boundaries, because that's all the other industries are doing. And a good film is a good film. That's all there is to it. I can't thank you enough, Alan. I really cannot. And your charity dues and what you set off to do is brilliant. I just absolutely, I haven't got my hat on, but if I had, I would definitely take it off to you because it's great. Please keep doing it.
No, thank you. Listen, you're well, and I'm definitely going to get you back on for one of these again in the future. And I'm going to be starting a new job in the next probably couple of weeks, and there's going to be some driving involved. I will be driving down south, and trust me, if I'm going to be coming via Bridlington, I will absolutely hook you up, and we'll get out for a pint. How does that sound?
We've just got to do it. Got to do it. It's the law.
Brilliant. Listen, thank you very much to everybody that's watched it tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and massive thanks, Andy, for taking time out. I better let you get back to your wife. So thank you very much, mate. You have a great weekend.
You too.
It's been awesome. Take care, buddy.
Thanks a million. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.